What is up, guys? It is Joe. We're back. We're talking all about the Cats, specifically K-State basketball, as I rave about two players on the roster that are continuing to take shape as stars in the eyes of everyone in the country. Now, before I get into the video, quick reminder, hit the subscribe button. It helps out immensely. And 3,000 subs, I'm getting a cat script tattoo on the left thigh. Continuing to inch closer and closer towards that goal. So when we do hit it, I'll get that tat and I'll post about it on social media. Probably toss something up in the community post as well so you guys on YouTube can see it. But I do want to talk a little bit about K-State basketball, and I want to get the caveat out of the way now. I understand that we stunk for 17 games. I get that. I won't lie to you about that. That being said, I'm also not going to be one of the dudes that sits here and crucifies the staff for such a bad start and then not give them credit for how they've bounced back. I understand that you can do both. Hey, first half of the season stunk. Currently, we're on a nice win streak. Let's keep this thing rolling. You got to look at it both ways, so I'm not just going to sit here and say, well, they're great now. However, they stunk in the past, so I think they stink. Not going to do that. Today, I'm raving about two specific players that are stepping closer and closer to the star role for Kansas State on the basketball court alongside a couple of dudes that I want to discuss in today's video. And guys, you saw it the last couple of weeks. You've seen it all season to an extent, but especially the last couple of games against Iowa State. And the more I think about that game, the more I watch the highlights. It is such a crazy thing to see the development that Kansas State's had in a 3-4 game period. Like, these dudes are at the point where 5 games ago they were dead in the water. They were awful. They were one of the worst teams in the Big 12. You could go as far to say they were the laughingstock of the Big 12 conference. Now that's not the case. You're beating the third-ranked team in the country, the third-best team in college basketball, at their home stadium in front of a packed-out crowd where they haven't lost in nearly 30 games. Kansas State, who hasn't won a road game in a literal year, comes out, looks like the best team in college basketball for one night only. That's an incredible feat. And in that game, I keep going back to two topics. Two things that have been discussed a ton. Coleman Hawkins worth every penny. Doug McDaniel is starting to be the guy you knew he could be if he got committed, if he got locked in, if he bought in. He's there. Doug McDaniel has arrived. This team is going to go as he does, and I won't take away from that. But what I do want to mention are the surrounding pieces to Coleman Hawkins and Doug McDaniel. I know that they're the stars. Everyone knows they're the stars of the program, but Kansas State has some real gems in both Brendan Hausen and Max Jones. These are two guys that really have worked their tail off, and guys that the staff identified that were more so under-recruited guys, under-ranked guys in the transfer portal, and developed them into legitimate stars, and I want to talk about each of them in today's video. So the first thought I want to mention for both dudes, then I'll jump in specifically for one and the other, but they have both developed into elite shooters in college basketball. Now, everybody gives Brendan Hausen the moniker of this dude is an elite lights-out shooter. Guys, Max Jones has turned into a dang good shooter in his own right, and you've seen that at multiple points throughout the season. They've also turned into effort and hustle guys that truly bleed Kansas State. This was a roster where it seemed like nobody bled Kansas State. Max and Brendan have done it the entire season. They've worked their tails off to be there, and even when they've had moments where it's like, all right, I'm out of position defensively, all right, I'm not getting back here, I'm not doing this, the effort things they're doing right. There's certain things in the court where you just make a mistake, you don't make the play, you don't do this. Since they've talked about simplifying the game plan, Coach Tang and his staff, these dudes have been elite. Both Brendan Hausen and Max Jones have become fan favorites, especially fan favorites for me, but fan favorites in your eyes as well, for doing the right thing, working their tails off, and hustling every single play. Now for Brendan Hausen, let me start here. He is averaging career highs in just about every single category. I have it pulled up over here, so I'm going to read off over here a little bit. Averaging 12.1 points per game, 2.4 rebounds, and 1 assist per game in 28 minutes played per game. That was not the case at Villanova. He was a 4 or 5 point scorer, 10-minute guy. He's getting starter minutes now because he is a starter, but he's the Cats' second leading scorer behind David Gasson by 0.01 point. David Gasson averaging 12.2, Brendan Hausen averaging 12.1 per game. He is one of 4 K-State scorers averaging double figures this season. Max is a close one behind almost as the 5th. There are 2 guys of those 4 that have multiple years of eligibility remaining, and that is Doug McDaniel and Brendan Hausen. Hausen's the second leading scorer. He is an absolute weapon for this Kansas State squad. And I know that there's been some Max haters. There's been some Brendan Hausen haters. I'm here to kind of basically just flex on him. That's kind of the idea I'm going for in today's video. But Brendan Hausen feels like a dude you want to keep around immensely. This is a dude that bleeds Kansas State, that feels like he's found his spot. I mean, it's the George Strait covers. It's the highlight tapes with different country music artists. Like, he is a guy that feels like Kansas State. This is a K-State basketball player that everybody's wanted for, the bulk of years. Like, an elite shooter in college basketball. You hadn't had that the last couple of years. You could go and say Keese was at times. He was a dagger-type guy. Keontae's an elite scorer. But Brendan Hausen truly adds something that you haven't had for the last couple of years. TP had his moments, but a lot of it was streaky, hot, and cold. Brendan Hausen's figured it out, and he's taking good shots, getting good looks, and draining them all. He's one of the best shooters in America, folks. He's got the second best three-point percentage in the Big 12 Conference. That's at 41.3%, only behind UCF's Darius Johnson. He leads the league by a ton. He leads the league by a wide margin of three-pointers made per game. He's making 3 per game. That is number 1 in the Big 12 Conference. And you can say all that. You can say that he's an elite shooter. You can say that he's a weapon anytime he steps on the court. But the thing that you've seen the last couple of games, the last couple of weeks, The dude has had a chip on his shoulder about the defensive side of the ball, about rebounding, glass cleaning. Like, the dude gets up and understands, like, okay, my production is limited based on what I can do on both sides of the court. I can't just be an either-or guy. Now, I don't think anybody's sitting here saying he needs to be an elite, like a Cam Carter-type defender. I don't think anybody's going to sit here and say he needs to be the best defender on the team, but if he can be a plus defender, an average defender, or even just slightly average, like, he is going to get so much more advantage because he's going to be on the court constantly. And Brendan Hausen, you've seen that the last couple weeks. Against Iowa State, he was incredible defensively. He was effort constantly, locking down Keyshawn Gilbert, locking down Curtis Jones, who's one of the best scorers in the Big 12 Conference. Obviously, Doug McDaniel helped with that. CJ helped with that. Max helped with that. There wasn't a drop-off when Hausen was on the court in terms of defense. That's what you need to see. And even if it is a team where you have 4 solid defenders, one guy that's not so great, you can hide middle to average defenders. Like, you can hide those dudes in coverages. But Brendan Hausen said, nah, to hell with that. I'm working my ass off, and I'm going to compete on the opposite side of the court as well. 2 plays stuck out in that game, and I think you've seen both of them, but let's talk about both. One of them offensive, one of them defensive. We'll start with defense since we're on that topic. The play where Doug McDaniel slips, Iowa State's already on their run. Doug McDaniel slips. It's a fast break going the other way with Keyshawn Gilbert and Curtis Jones going the other way. Brendan Hausen sprints all the way back into the play, steals the rock, gets fouled, and hits both free throws. The effort and hustle, okay, this is pretty much a free basket for Iowa State. I'm still going to do the right thing. I'm still going to take the next right step. Let me get back on defense in case I can get a hand up and contest something. Let me see if any of my other guys can get back in the play. No, sir. The dude sprints over there, strips the rock from one of the better point guards in the Big 12 Conference, gets fouled, hits 2 points. That was a momentum, drastic changer for Kansas State. That was a heart, hustle, effort play from Brendan Hausen. Then on the opposite end of the court, you all know what I'm going to say here. Brendan Hausen pulling up from like 45 feet out on the logo of the court where a sponsorship company is. Brendan Hausen pulling up, 10 seconds on the shot clock. There's still time. You could take a couple dribbles, get closer, have a contested 3. Nah, I'm just going to shoot this. It's going in. I'm going to shoot this. Drills it. The deepest shot I've seen this season from Kansas State, even the last 2 or 3 seasons from Kansas State, drains it. Turns around, throws up the 3. He's taunting the crowd. He's doing his thing. That's what you want an elite shooter to be, saying it doesn't matter whose hand's up. It doesn't matter who's near me. I'm shooting this and it's going in. Brendan Hausen is an elite weapon. He's an offensive threat. If he can continue to add that stuff on defense and rebounding, he is going to be a heck of a ball player in Manhattan, and I am pumped to have him around next year. I know that the transfer portal and college basketball can change fast, but I feel like Brendan Hausen is truly locked in at Kansas State. Both these dudes feel like great teammates, too. I should also mention that stuff off the court. I haven't had a ton of experiences with either per se, but the couple times I have interacted with them on social media, whatever the case is, they've seemed like good dudes, good teammates, all around, team-type guys. Both guys are entering different roles in college basketball. Brendan Hausen coming off the bench, having 10 minutes, got to get a couple of shots a game, get some good looks, go back to the bench. He's now a starter. He's now putting up good minutes. Max Jones goes from a spot where he was the entire offense at Cal State Fullerton. This was a game where if Max doesn't drop 30, we're not beating a Power 5 team. Max could do it, in certain games here and there, he'd have big scoring outputs, but he has to be your primary ball handler, the guy creating your offense, also is your best scorer at Cal State Fullerton. Now he's at a role where he's not number 1 guy. He's not, 1A. What he is, though, is he's one of the best complements that Kansas State's had in terms of guys developing around him. Like, your stars are Doug McDaniel, Coleman Hawkins. But you can't sit here and say that the 3 other dudes on the court, and David Gasson, Max Jones, and Brendan Hausen, aren't also threats, aren't also weapons, aren't guys that you can say, well, let's sag off. I mean, ask KU fans how they feel about KJ Adams on the court. Guy you can sag off 5 feet from, just let him do whatever at the top of the key, he's not getting by you. These are guys you don't have to do that to. You have to worry about everyone on the basketball court. David Gasson included, Max Jones included, Brendan Hausen included. And with Max specifically, his role is diminished from what he was. Obviously, he's averaging 35 minutes a game at Fullerton, has to be the everything guy. This time we're looking for effort, intensity, hustle, and then he's also starting to step into more of that role of like Max is a legit bucket. I mean, I know that there was some, concern of when Max showed up on campus, they were like, well, I don't know if this guy's going to work out. We don't know if he's going to translate. Then he comes back from break and he looks really, really good. So good that we talked about him on the channel a couple of times. We also saw, Jeff Goodman rave about the kid. You saw a couple of different dudes talk about the dude and truly rave about Max Jones. Now this season, let's talk about stats because I think this is something commendable. A lot of people talk about guys like Desi Sills that are fan favorites. Part of that is the fact that Desi's an awesome player. He's a fan favorite type dude. A lot of that is also, hey, the team really was an elite college basketball team that will be remembered forever. They go all the way to the Elite Eight. Those guys will be remembered. But with Desi Sills specifically, he felt like a guy that was here for multiple years, even though he just had the one, because of how bought in, how much effort he played with. I've heard the comparison a lot, and I want to give a shout out to Derek Young over at On3. Him and the rest of the 3 Mile guys talked about this at length, so this is where that idea kind of comes from. But a lot of people have compared his game to Desi Sills in terms of Max Jones. Two very different players. I'm not going to run from that. Two very, very different players. Desi's a hyper-athletic dude, even though he's only 6'2". Guy's jumping up and dunking on dudes. Awesome in transition, effort, hustle, intensity. Max is a three-point sniper, an outside presence, a good defender, but truly a bucket. Like, he's a fundamental basketball player that is a really good plus on your basketball court. But with that, let's listen to the stats because they're very, very similar to Desi Sills. Super quick break. If you're watching this video and you're not subscribed, 63% of the people watching this video right now are currently not subscribed to the YouTube channel, and feel free absolutely to ignore this and skip this, whatever the case is. But those of you that are watching right now and are unsubscribed, be sure and consider hitting that subscribe button if you love Kansas State, if you appreciate the channel. It's a great way to support me as I continue to grow on this journey, and it's also incredible to bring more K-State fans in like yourself on a consistent basis to see more of my K-State content. Once again, if you're in that 63% or if you're in the alternative in the 37%, I love and appreciate you. Back to the Cats. Max this season's averaging 9.6 per game. Desi last season with us, or 2 seasons ago with us, is averaging 8.7 per game. Max at 3.9 rebounds per game, Desi at 3.5. Max at 2.1 assists per game, Desi at 2.2. Field goal shooting here. Desi at 44.9% from the field, Max at 42. These dudes statistically are very, very similar players that can give you an effort and intensity that you need on the basketball court. And for Max Jones specifically, I know that Brendan Hausen gets the idea of like, this is the elite shooter on your team. You got to get out there, get a hand up. Max is just as deadly from three, if not on that same playing field. Like when you look at the stats side by side, Hausen's more of a volume three-point shooter. He's taking more shots, but Max's stats are incredible. He's shooting an elite 40.5% from three, and he's less than 1% behind Brendan Hausen, who's truly a top 10 shooter in college basketball. And on the topic of talking about specific plays in that Iowa State game in the last couple of weeks, Max had some good stuff to mention. 2 plays that come to mind. Both were offensive plays. I know Max has been really good on defense as well, has the effort, has the hustle. Kind of got boned with some 50-50 calls, but whatever. You win the basketball game. No worries about that. With Max, the 2 plays that stand out are here. The first one, and this is one that all of you should be thinking out immediately when I say this, him breaking down the Iowa State big when he gets switched off, he gets a mismatch. Max Jones knows, okay, 35 seconds on the clock, let's get this thing going. Breaks down the big for Iowa State, pulls up in his face, buries the 3. Turns around, knows he got smacked. You could hear it on the broadcast. He's saying, hey, I got fouled there. Doesn't matter. Max fights through it, buries the 3, gets the momentum, gets back on defense. That first one comes to mind immediately. He hit that shot, and that felt like, okay, I'm here. I figured it out. There's no speed, too fast for me. There's no pace too crazy for me. I've adjusted. I am ready to be here in the Big 12 Conference as a reliable player, like 10 points a game. That's what I'm going to give you consistently night in, night out. And he hits shots. Doesn't matter if it's a knockdown 3 where he's open, if it's just, good passing. If he needs to hit a step back 3 on somebody, he's going to bury it. Max Jones with that. That was the first play. The second one was kind of the old man game from Max Jones, I'll say. The fundamentals, kind of Uncle Drew the kid. Gets in a low block, drives to Iowa State, has a double team, and instead of fighting through, kicking it out, panicking, turning the ball over, Max pivots, looks around, steps through the defender, layup with the outside hand up and in. Max, the lefty, goes with the roll off the right hand, up and in. That was a huge play for Max Jones and an offensive addition that we needed. And you left the broadcast crew saying, dang, that's Max Jones' kid, man. He's looking good tonight. These are kids from Villanova. Obviously, it's a big school with Jay Wright. I get it. I'm not going to try to tell you that it's not. These are kids from Cal State Fullerton, originally D2 Tampa. And then you get a kid that goes to Kansas State and is a star for both teams. Like, both guys understand, hey, I'm in a new role, I'm in a new spot, let's make the most of this thing here. You got to give the staff credit for finding the right guys in the transfer portal. Even if it took 17 games, I get that. Next year when you go into the conference play, when you go into league play, when you start off the season, you're going to need some more Maxes and Brendans. Let's talk about that right now. You're going to need a couple of guys like that understand the culture, that want to work their tail off and provide effort, even if certain guys on the court aren't. How does that pick up the whole unit? You're seeing how it does the last 3 games. My final overarching thought, and I want to say this right here, so shout out to the staff, by the way, for adding those dudes. I know that the biggest competitor for Brendan, I think, was Nebraska, and then for Max, there was a couple people talking about it. I heard Texas Tech was mentioned. I don't know if that's true. It was a pretty quick and quiet, recruitment. He comes to Kansas State, is a stud, is a great player. But with these 2 dudes, let's talk about this. Brendan Hausen, I think you're back next year. I think he's a good player, and I want him back in Manhattan. I will not tolerate the slander. Get this kid back. You're averaging 12 points a game on a Big 12 basketball court. Like, you're a good player. You're shooting 40% from 3. You're a top 10 shooter in college basketball. You should be back at Kansas State. For Max Jones, how do we sue the NCAA for D2 guys? Diego Pavia for the JUCO guys gets eligibility. How do we talk about this with the D2 rule? Because I don't feel like we're all that far off. Could something change in that department? I don't think it's that far out of the question. If Max gets another year of eligibility, hopefully we hear something soon. But I would like Max back, absolutely. If you can pull that off, bring back Max. He's a top 3 player on your team right now. And I think the team will be really solid. I think you really want to keep both those guys. But I understand that the Max conversation is definitely not super likely, but the way college athletics is right now, the way the NCAA is right now, I wouldn't put it past them, folks. But that's going to do it for today's video. Just want to shout out Brendan and Max one time. I appreciate both dudes and the effort they show up with consistently. K-State's got a big game tonight against Arizona State. We'll talk about that. But thank you all for being here. I appreciate each and every one of you. Go Cats, and I will talk to you soon.